Namaste, I am Dr. S.K. Sharma, Assistant Director General, Human Resource Management, Indian Council of Agriculture Research, New Delhi. Today we will discuss on the topic natural farming and the climate change. We all know that climate change is one of the three very important planetary crises with which the humanity is having great challenge in the time to come. So this topic is basically related to that, how natural farming is able to cope up with the effect of the climate change. We know that climate change is caused by the global warming, and the global warming in turn is caused by the evolution of the carbon dioxide as well as the greenhouse gases into the environment. So we would like to know that what is the contribution of the different sectors in the evolution of the carbon dioxide and the greenhouse gases into the environment that contribute to the effect of the climate change. This particular slide shows that the energy sector contributes up to the 75% in the total carbon dioxide emission in India, followed by the agriculture, which contributes 14% to the total CO2 emission, and then followed by industrial process and product use, and then by the waste, that is only the 2.7%. In terms of the quantity, if we just rank the different sectors of the Indian economy that contributes to the evolution of the CO2 in our country, then it is the power sector which ranks first with the 1120 million tons of the carbon dioxide equivalent greenhouse gas emission, followed by the industry, then agriculture, then transport, then wastewater and the waste, then the building. The total emission of the carbon dioxide in terms of the greenhouse gases equivalent in our country, it contributes 3074 million ton of the carbon dioxide. So this indicates that agriculture is one of the important contributor to the emission of the greenhouse gases into the environment, and is also responsible for the effect of the global warming and the climate change. Within the agriculture, there are different processes which contributes to the emission of the carbon dioxide as well as the nitrous oxide and the methane into the environment, which are generally called as the greenhouse gases. When we have the measurement of these contribution of the different processes from within the agriculture sector at the global level and at the country level. At the global level, the maximum contribution is from the soil processes, followed by the livestock, which contributes 32%, followed by the burning of the biomass, which contributes 12%, then rice cultivation, which contributes 11%, and then the manure. But when the same processes, if they are measured with respect to the India, then things are a little bit different. In case of our country, livestock contributes maximum to the emission of the carbon dioxide or the greenhouse gases into the environment, that is 63%, followed by rice cultivation, then followed by the soil processes and burning of biomass, and then the manure. And another aspect that we can discuss here and can learn is that over the years, if we have the measurement of the contribution of the different our greenhouse gases in our country from 2008 to 2021, then in case of livestock, the emission of the carbon dioxide from this sector has reduced. Similarly, in case of the rice cultivation, the contribution toward the emission of the carbon dioxide and the greenhouse gases, it has been reduced from 21 to 17.5%. Next. In this particular scenario, if you discuss that, yes, agriculture is one of the contributor, but at the same time, agriculture is also one of the important sector which can contribute to the carbon sequestration as well as the mitigation of as well as the adaptation of the climate change effect. And in that respect, at the global level, there are several strategies and programs and commitments have been there. And India has also taken certain strategies as well as the programs have been initiated in our country. And Few of them are that India is committed to achieve the 17 sustainable goals by 2030, and it is very interesting that each sustainable goals, at least one indicator out of the 169 indicators deals with the environmental aspects. So natural farming and the alternative strategies, then the intensified agriculture and chemical agriculture becomes very important strategy with respect to these environmental commitments. Another is the net zero carbon emission by 2070. Here again, whatever the amount of the greenhouse gases which are emitted to the environment, same amount should be sequestered from the environment, so that by 2070 we can become the net zero carbon emission country. And in that respect, natural farming and alternative strategies are very important. Third commitment is the land degradation neutrality by 2030, which is very important aspects for our country, and it deals with the vegetation cover, then soil health amelioration, as well as increasing the biocapacity and reducing the soil erosion, so that we can improve our soil qualities. So natural farming practices also leads towards this particular measurement, that is the land degradation neutrality. In this regard also, several green growth targets have been taken up by the government of India, like the Pranam scheme, which can be extended as the program for the restoration, awareness generation and nourishment and amelioration of the mother earth, which is very important, that we should reduce the use of the chemical fertilizers and the chemicals, and at the same time emphasize on the more eco-friendly agriculture measures. So that will also promote the optimal chemical usage. So this will also help in transition of our farmers towards the farming, chemical less farming. Then carbon credit scheme as well as the green credit market that has been announced by the government of India will also help in development of the both compliance and the voluntary market in this sector, and our farmers can benefit from these schemes also. So far we have known that agriculture is a very important sector in Indian economy with respect to the both effect as well as the mitigation of the climate change. So there are several processes and methods and the aspects where the agriculture sector, if taken in the eco-friendly manner, we can mitigate the potential of the greenhouse gases which have been emitted into the environment, and that mitigation potential is around the 385 million tons of the carbon dioxide equivalent. And these different the sectors are, that is through the soil carbon sequestration. At the cropland we can sequester around the 155 million ton of carbon dioxide equivalent of the greenhouse gases. Through the enteric fermentation from the all ruminants, this amounts contributes to 135 million tons of the carbon dioxide. Then through the nutrient management practices, 75 million ton of the CO2 can be sequestered. And from the stored manure management from all livestock, around 20 million tons of the carbon dioxide equivalent greenhouse gases can be sequestered. So in overall, this potential is 385 million tons of the CO2 equivalent of the greenhouse gases. Now, this is very clear that eco-friendly practices are very important in agriculture sector to reduce the effect of the climate change or to reduce the emission of the greenhouse gases. In that way, the transition of the towards the organic natural farming by 2030 in our country has been taken as an important strategy in agriculture sector, and the doubt regarding the effect of the transition of the organic and natural farming, it has been now clarified by the government of India and the Niti Aayog, that looking to our present growth rate of the food grain production and the demand of the food, as well as the yield penalty of 30% in the organic natural farming, India has the scope to replace around the 20% of the area from conventional farming to organic natural farming by 2030. And at this rate, we can also maintain the balance between the growth in demand and supply of agri-food. So this gives a way out and the step further that we can think of the transition of our farmers towards the organic natural farming and the natural farming practices. Now, in the natural farming, there are different kind of the concepts are there. Even global level in the Japan and in other countries, natural farming concept is prevalent. But from the Indian perspective, natural farming has its own views that this whole universe consists of the five basic non living components, which are the earth, the water, the energy, the air, and the atmosphere or the space. Indian perspective, since the beginning of our ancient literature, if we go into the detail, then it indicates that this whole universe consists of the physical and the metaphysical elements, and all these elements at the universal level, at the nature's level, they maintain the balance with the living component. So our concept says there are two laws which governs the natural farming. One is the universal law, balance among all these five elements should be kept at each space over a period of the time. But at the same time, within a given natural ecosystem that is called as the nature, the cause and effect relationship should be maintained with respect to the living and non-living component. If this balance is imbalanced, then definitely humanity will be under the danger, because that imbalance will disturb our ecological setup. But with respect to the Chinese and Japanese, they have that space is nowhere existing. They just believe in the four bhutas, that is the earth, water, energy, air, and these four elements, and not the atmosphere. So they have their sequential development, and they say that if the sequence is broken, then definitely the balance is broken, and that's why ecology is disturbed. So our Indian perspective says that whole Earth is one planet, and it can be considered as the one planet when this balance is maintained. So with respect to our Indian ecological conditions and socio-economic conditions, the definition of the natural farming given by the Ministry of Agriculture and Farmer Welfare is that natural farming is a chemical-free natural farming system wherein use of the low-cost inputs, specifically the cow dung, urine, and plant extracts base, coupled with recommended agronomic practices like mulching and intercropping, are promoted. So another definition by the Niti Aayog, which is also involves the same concept, that natural farming is a chemical free alias traditional farming method. It is considered as agroecology based diversified farming system which integrates crops, trees, and livestock with the functional biodiversity. So both the definitions are very important to take the principle and practices for the further use, because they emphasize on the local ecosystem, they emphasize on the integration of the different components within the ecosystem, they emphasize on the chemical free nature, they emphasize on the low cost inputs, they emphasize on the traditional system of the farming. So here before we understand the effect of the natural farming on the climate change, we should learn about the basic aspects which really affects the overall environment as well as the microclimate and the vicinity of the environment. That is, no synthetic chemical use, no chemicals, fertilizers, antibiotics, and the hormones are used. So automatically there is a reduction of the emission of the greenhouse gases, because a lot of greenhouse gases emissions is there from the synthetic components. Then enhancing crop biodiversity, it is another component which says that functional biodiversity enhances both upper ground surface and lower ground surface. It is said that below the soil surface more than 25% biodiversity is there. So they helps into the different transformation process of the nutrients, the habitat for the different kind of the macro and microorganisms, as well as they enhances the ecosystem services. Then covering the soil throughout the year, it helps in reducing the evaporation by reflecting the solar radiations, as well as also gives the suitable habitat for the several microorganisms and the microbiome, and also reduces the soil erosion, thus helps in reduction of the greenhouse gases emissions as well as the buildup of the soil health. The lower minimal tillage, this is a very important aspect of the natural farming, where because of the higher conventional tillage practices, soil is disturbed, but in case of natural farming, soil is minimally disturbed, and so no erosion is there, no nitrogen loss is there, small carbon loss is there, or carbon loss is minimized, as well as the other moisture is also conserved, and the soil erosion is reduced. Then crop residue mulching, it directly contributes towards the carbon sequestration and helps into the reduction of the greenhouse gas emissions. Then use of farmers' own seed or local seeds, it helps for the development of the naturally inbuilt climate resiliency in the system, because these seeds are well adapted to the natural climatic conditions and extremes of the weather situations. Then use of microbial inoculants and biostimulant, they are locally prepared and help into the strengthening the soil ecosystem, as well as they are low cost or on farm prepared. Integrating indigenous animals into the farming, this is very important because it helps into the better ecosystem service functioning, as well as the recycling of the nutrients, as well as giving the risk minimization to the our whole system. Then WAPSA, it helps into the better water management when it is needed at the field capacity, so reduce the loss of the water and enhances the water use efficiency. The need based pest management, it really important that no synthetic pesticides are used, but locally available botanicals and other concoctions are used, which are low cost, as well as there is no more emission of the greenhouse gases are there. So based on these important principles in the concept, there are certain basic components which are being popularly used by the farmers in the natural farming, which are really locally prepared and helps to adapt and mitigate the effect of the climate change at the low cost within the several agroclimatic conditions of the country. These are the Jivamrit, Bijamrit, Ghanjivamrit, intercropping, and there are several botanical concoctions like the Dasparni, Nimastra, Brahmastra, and at the same time the integration of these crop biodiversity and component with the indigenous animals, indigenous cow. So here we can see that based on the our this particular discussion, that natural farming promotes the sustainability into the our ecosystem and into the farming. It promotes the three pillars of the sustainability. One is the economic aims, that natural farming enhances the employment opportunities because of the higher labor need, and in the all aspects of the production, processing, distribution, and marketing. And another part is that yield is very important part of the economic aims, but there are several studies and the farmers' experiences and the success stories and the things which have been reported at the country level and at the global level, that during the transition phase there is a reduction into the yield, and Niti Aayog has also accepted that an average yield reduction of the 30% across the different crops like the legumes, grain crops, fruit and vegetables average has been taken, but it varies from crop to crop, region to region, and climatic conditions and cropping system level. Operating cost is reduced in case of natural farming because of the locally available inputs as well as the recycling of the inputs. Then the two important aspects are the ecological aims and the social aims, where we say that ecological aims basically refers to our ecosystem services, where the both supporting ecosystem services as well as the regulating ecosystem services, which supports to the adaptation and mitigation to the climate change. Biodiversity is increased in the natural farming by more than 25%. Carbon sequestration across the different crops, trees and biomass crops, it is 10 to 20% higher in natural farming. Then soil and water conservation is increased in case of with natural farming practices up to 10 to 30%. Another aspect is the social aims, that it promotes the social equity because it is a participatory approach. It is a better responsible production and consumption of the resources is there. Better cooperation among the local communities is there. It promotes the low cost of production, low input use, as well as that the medical cost under the natural farming is also reduced with the families because of the better nutritious status, because of the diversified system, as well as the better ecosystem, less polluted food as well as the safe food. Then labor need is also increased because of the different components, and because now consumer demand for the safe food is increasing. So in the natural farming, market opportunities are also increasing, and premium price is being paid to the farmers where there is a good market opportunities existing in the metropolitan cities and the international export market. Another aspect of natural farming with respect to the climate adaptation and mitigation is that not only it reduces the emission of the this greenhouse gases, but it promotes the well-being of the community and the farmers, because it elevates the poverty of the small and marginal farmers, increase the food security, because it involves the use of cheaper inputs, because small and marginal farmers, if they are not able to purchase the higher inputs, they can have this kind of the farming. And if they can tap the international safe food market, export market, local market with the premium prices, they can get the higher and the more stable prices. Further, the diversified system and integration with the livestock and the multi-layer system, it also avoids the risk of the extremes of the climate change. And it also promotes the well-being, means overall quality of the life from families and communities, because of the better community economic works as well as the social interaction and cooperative employment opportunities, as well as across the societies, across the tribal region, across the agroclimatic regions. These concepts can be responsible for the overall well-being of the community overall in the given ecosystem. Now, this is very important that there are several facets of the natural farming, several components of natural farming, but how exactly they are working for the mitigation and the adaptation of the climate change. We have known that in the climate change we include the extreme weather conditions, heat waves, cold waves, then flood, drought, cyclones, hurricanes. There are so many climatic situations are there in the last decade. These frequencies of the droughts and the cyclones, as well as the hot and cold waves, extreme night and the day temperature have increased. But the natural farming practices help into the mitigation through the four very important practices, that is soil carbon sequestration, then reduce synthetic fertilizer and chemicals, increase biodiversity and improved water management and water holding capacity. In the similar line, it is more adapted to the whatever the risk which is now being visualized, that already the temperature has increased, extreme weathers are being witnessed. So how to adapt and minimize the risk under the natural farming. So these are the certain important features which really are improved under the natural farming conditions. That is, natural farming helps in resilient soil health. It diversified farming system minimizes the risk across the different crops and cropping systems and farming system and different enterprises, then enhances the all, not only the provisioning food services, but also the supporting and regulating services are increased, number of pollinators, beneficial insects are increased, earthworm population is increased. So it helps to regulate the our different nutrient cycle, water cycle and energy cycle. Then improved water harvesting system is there in natural farming at the community level. Then support to climate tolerant crops, it emphasizes on the adoption of the local indigenous seeds and the varieties which are tolerant to the extremes of the weather conditions. Then reduce post harvest losses because of the quality of the produce, the greenhouse gases emissions are also minimized. Then empowered local communities, it helps gives the confidence for the cooperative management of the resources and also leads toward the better and the responsive production and the consumption of the resources, which in long term help to adapt towards the changing weather conditions and climatic conditions. These different kind of the measures and the factors, they lead to the reduction of the greenhouse gases by 30 to 40% in natural farming. If we also reduce the use of the chemical nitrogen fertilizers, pesticides, and their effect is also counted. So overall, very important aspect of natural farming is the carbon sequestration, that it has a potential to sequester up to the equivalent of the 5 to 20% of all current man-made greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture. On per hectare basis, it has a potential to sequester 200 to 2000 kilogram of the carbon per hectare, depending upon the practices of the natural farming, the scale of operation of the natural farming, as well as the soil management practices in the different regions and soil and climatic conditions. But there are certain key issues which are very important to keep into consideration to have the more and more benefits from the natural farming practices for better carbon sequestration. First is that there is a need for optimization of the quantity and application of the on-farm manure, because it is a very region specific practices are adopted in different agroclimatic regions in the country. So depending upon their agroclimatic situations, initial carbon, soil carbon content, as well as the temperature conditions, water availability conditions, quantity and application of on-farm manure should be optimized. Similarly, the integration of the crop production and the animal husbandry and the systematic recycling of organic waste is one of the important aspects to have the better advantage of carbon sequestration in the different cropping systems in the natural farming. Then improved methods and the technologies for organic waste processing to obtain high quality manure, because different concoctions manures they are on farm prepared, so their protocols of the preparations, their losses of the different gases from during this preparation and their quality need to be ensured, and it should be quantified as well as their protocol should be made aware to the farmers. Then long and the diversified crop rotations and legume cropping help to increase soil organic carbon sequestration. So effect of the natural farming depends upon the duration for which natural farming practices are applied over a given space and the time. So more the number of the years and the more number of the crop rotations of the legume effect are better. So it depends that how many years of the cropping and what kind of the crops are being taken up into the system. Another aspect of the natural farming is that natural farming affect the soil properties, biodiversity and enzyme activity. They in turn affect the soil health as well as the both the supporting services as well as the regulating services. The soil properties, physical, chemical and biological properties are generally improved in the natural farming. In case of biodiversity, life in the soil, it is said that more than 25% of the total biodiversity remains below the surface of the soil. So to maintain the proper biome into the soil and even the disease resistance capacity of the soil is also depend upon the life in the soil. Then crop biodiversity means more the number of the crops both in terms of their root diversity as well as the crop canopy diversity. It decides the several ecological ecosystem services and regulating services. At the same time, different kind of the crop residues and roots exudates are secreted into the soil, which help into the strengthening of the biodiversity as well as the macro and microorganisms. Then beneficial insect population is generally increased in case of the natural farming practices because of the more number of the crops as well as the multi-layer cropping systems. Then intensity and diversification and the livestock, integration of the livestock is very important because it also helps into the recycling of the nutrients and better microclimatic conditions on the given space as well as the recycling of the energies and the different regulating cycles within the given space. Then soil enzyme properties are very important because soil enzymes and the quantification at a given period and the space, it indicates the kind of the quantity of the microbiome which is available, means the release pattern of the nutrients, the vitality of the soil, that is indicated by the soil enzyme properties. But in natural farming, most of the soil enzymes which are positive, they are increased, so they regulate the nutrient services, they regulate the mineralization of the nutrient, they regulate the antibiotic properties and the rhizospheric activities into the soil for the better development of the roots and hence the better nutrient extraction, better plant growth and development. So here there are certain examples that this particular study has been done under the ICAR, All India Network Project on Organic and Natural Farming in 3 centers at Bhopal and Gangtok, Coimbatore. This indicates that under the complete natural farming practices, the property of the soil, that is the bulk density, particle density, hydraulic conductivity, infiltration rate and porosity and water holding capacity were studied. Bulk density is reduced in the natural farming because of the higher porosity. That particle density is also reduced in natural farming. Hydraulic conductivity is increased because of the better porosity and better aggregation of the particles. Then infiltration rate is increased under the natural farming. Then porosity is increased in natural farming, and overall water holding capacity of the soil is increased under the natural farming, which indicates that these are the parameters and the properties which directly supports to the adaptation towards the extremes of the climate change. They provide the buffering capacity to the changes in the soil and also the better water holding capacity delays the senescence period to the of the crops because of under the natural farming practices. Similarly, the earthworm population after 2 years of the study is increased under the natural farming in comparison to the control. Soil physical, chemical and biological properties in natural farming were also studied at the global level. This is the case study from the Japan, where after 7 years of the continuous natural farming, then conventional practices with chemicals, conventional practices without chemicals, as well as natural farming. So they studied the water content, bulk density, pH, EC, then content of the ammonium, then nitrate content, urease activity, nitrate reductase activity, total carbon, total nitrogen, and carbon nitrogen ratio. This study indicates that, being the long term study, that under the natural farming, water content is increased, the bulk density is reduced, pH comes towards is increased, is come towards the neutralization, and because of the more ammonization, then electrical conductivity is reduced, the content of the ammonium ions is increased, nitrogen is reduced in case of the natural farming, but urease activity is increased in natural farming at the depth of the 0 to 10 centimeter. The nitrate reductase activity is increased in case of the natural farming. Total carbon as well as this total nitrogen is increased in the natural farming, and carbon nitrogen ratio is almost similar at the both the depth of the soil 0 to 10 centimeter and 10 to 20 centimeter in the all three practices of the conventional practices with chemicals and without chemicals and natural farming. So this indicates that most of the soil physical, chemical and biological properties after a long period they are increased in natural farming system in K-base in comparison to other systems. So this is again another study where the natural farming practices, how they affect the biological properties of soil after harvest of the cowpea. It was taken from the study done at the ICAR All India Network Project on Organic Farming Udaipur Center, where complete natural farming practices, they improved the population of the bacteria, fungi and actinomycetes after the 2 years of the study, and they are almost similar or at par with the different other practices of the organic farming as well as the integrated crop management. Then this overall our discussion indicates that several physical, chemical, biological properties, the inbuilt nature of the natural farming practices, they are responsible for the mitigation as well as adaptation to the climate change. There are several case studies which indicate that in case of the drought, flood, weather extremes, cyclones, hurricanes and typhoons, if natural farming is practiced over a larger area as a community level, it can provide a kind of the sponge and a kind of the a particular mechanism to cope up with the effect of the climate change events. For example, the zero budget natural farming that given by the Subhas Palekar in mid 1990s, because of its low input nature as well as these components, it helps to combat with the risk diversification as well as the loss minimization as well as the improving the yield at the low input level. Then also called the Andhra Pradesh Community Managed Natural Farming, that was being undertaken by the Raitu Sadhikara Sanstha in Andhra Pradesh. So they believe that farmers are more vulnerable to decrease in the rainfall, high temperature and the cyclonic events, along with excessive tillage, deforestation and imbalanced use of fertilizers. In such conditions, if these practices of the natural farming are adopted, they will provide the better mechanism to the farmers at the low input level without external use of the inputs to maintain their own self-sustainable system at the lower cost and help to have the yield under the different environmental conditions. There are examples from the Himachal Pradesh that orchardists have successfully demonstrated the worth of the Subhas Palekar natural farming practices for producing good quality apples and sustaining apple productivity under climatic extremes. There are several success stories of many farmers and documentation by different organizations which indicate that natural farming practices are low input farming practices and they don't burden the farmers from the purchase of the high inputs from the market, but at the same time they adopt the diversified farming system in integration with the trees, crops and livestock. It helps to farmer to maintain the stable yield over a period of time under different climatic situations. Similarly, if this case study of the cyclone by the Andhra Pradesh Community Natural Farming versus chemical farms in Andhra Pradesh. So this study indicates that if such kind of the natural farming practices are practiced or implemented over a larger area on a community basis, for example, this particular study was conducted in 3,730 villages with 8.5 lakh farmers, 3.78 lakh hectare area. So this study results indicate that it helps to enhance water holding capacity, less water use, drought resilience, reduction in the greenhouse gases, and the risk adaptation through crop diversification and reduction in the threat to the food security because of the stable yield over the extreme climatic situations. This is a particular example of that climate natural farming has inbuilt climate resilience. So there are farmer testimonials in the reports that the zero budget natural farming under this particular practice crops withstood cyclone Michong under the two farming systems from three districts of the Andhra Pradesh, Bapatla, Gundur and West Godavari, where cyclone velocity was very high, rainfall was high, but in case of paddy, cotton and banana, chili, these study were done. So paddy damage was only 5% in zero budget natural farming, it was 100% in chemical farming, and even the conditions of the submergence was tolerated by the paddy crop under the natural farming. Then the conventional farming, the submergence was less in case of paddy field, and yield was there in the paddy field and higher than the conventional farming. Number of damage dealers were less in case of natural farming plots. So it provides a strength as well as the stubbornness and buoyancy in case of natural farming before better plant growth and development even under the extreme climatic situations. So in conclusion, we can say that agriculture significantly impacts the environment and natural farming practices can play a significant role in soil organic carbon sequestration and reduce emission of the greenhouse gases. The rate and the amount of the soil organic carbon sequestration differ with soil type, depth, land use and land cover and varies from one region to another. Use of efficient natural farming inputs and practices help to conserve moisture, better soil aggregates, reduce soil erosion, ultimately enhance carbon sequestration, soil health and adaptation to the climate change. Research and the policy support for development of the natural farming modules based on the ecosystem principles is the need of the hour for upscaling of the natural farming, and similarly support to the small and marginal farmers, those who are working for the eco-friendly agriculture like natural farming should be given in terms of the high premium prices and other support services from the government and other organizations. Thank you very much.